gentlemen, welcome back to episode, oh my god, what episode are we on? 12? I forgot. It's been a week. It's been a couple weeks. What's going on, everybody? We missed last week. We're back. What a last wild week it has been. If you're watching on the YouTube version, things are looking a little bit different because some changes have been made. Oh, man. Things are very different than the last time that a podcast episode was done. A couple weeks ago now. Man, only a double-digit episodes into this, and we're already missing episodes. But I have a good reason, I promise. First things first, though. If you're watching on the YouTube version, we got a new setup. Things are looking different. We got a green screen now. Some of the background stuff has been adjusted. We got some new lighting. Things are looking good. Video version's getting upgraded. I love that. Anyway, let's take care of the typical podcast stuff. Those of you watching on the YouTube version, welcome back. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the new setup. Make sure to smack the Schmidt out of like button down below. Show this new podcast episode some love. Subscribe for new episodes every single Thursday. If you're on the audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google, and Stitcher, make sure to subscribe and follow on those platforms as well to stay up to date. New episodes every Thursday. If you're on Apple, leave those 5-star reviews. We'd love to read them out on the pod. Let's get into some stuff with the pod. So, new setup. Everything's looking great. Loving that. But where have I been? What happened last week? Well, I managed to survive COVID. Just over a year now into the worldwide pandemic of when we've been shut down by the COVID-19 coronavirus. And your boy finally got it. Man, we almost made it. Vaccines are starting to roll out now. Things are looking, there's at least a light at the end of the tunnel, and your boy almost made it out, but not quite. Not quite. My dad ended up getting it first here in my house, and I'm not typically within, the social distance parameters of him. We're usually not that close near each other enough to where it jumped out to me that there was a chance that I could have it. But the day that he got his test back, so he started feeling sick, I think like the week and a half ago. So the Saturday, like a week and a half ago, he started feeling sick, and then he ended up getting his work ended up making him get a COVID test. He got his results back Tuesday. They came back positive, which was kind of a surprise. It didn't seem as though that, it was going to come back positive. He didn't really have some of the main symptoms that would have pointed as something other than the flu. But on that day, he started to lose some of his smell and his taste, and his test came back positive. And I was like, well, I'm not usually within that close of a parameter, so I might be all right. And, yeah, long story short, that day when I woke up, I didn't feel the greatest. But, with this time of year and everything, I typically get sick or get some kind of cold or something because of the weather changing here in Michigan. So it's usually a pretty common thing to happen, is for me to be out for a day or so if need be, for just being sick because the weather changes. My body doesn't like it, and it sucks. But no, this one was COVID. This one was definitely COVID. It knocked me out, put me straight up in bed for better part of 4 to 5 days. Call it mostly 4, almost the entirety of 4 days, from like Wednesday through Saturday or so. Man, had a fever, all that stuff that I had over 100. Just felt totally weak. Chills and all that stuff that sucks. A lot of drainage in my throat and stuff. Just it was rough. Not a good experience. 10 out of 10 would not recommend. And man, not a fun virus. I almost made it through, but survived. Feeling much better now. I have had some things with my my nose with my smell and my taste that have seemed off. They don't seem right. My smell doesn't seem quite as strong. It's there, like I can smell stuff for sure, but it doesn't seem quite right. And some of my taste seems a little bit off with certain things, but luckily it doesn't seem like it's too bad. And hopefully within a little bit more time, things should be a lot more back to normal. But definitely feeling much better now. Over a week of having it, should be able to return to everything normal and be able to leave my house by the end of this week. So all things are looking up, but it did knock out the pod last week. I was kind of hoping, fingers crossed, that it wasn't COVID. But yeah, just the way I was feeling Wednesday, I knew that it was pretty unlikely that it was going to happen. I thought maybe, postpone it if this only lasts a couple days, and it's, it lasted. It took a long time. I guess funny enough, sorry, my throat is still in and out in some spots, so we're going to grind it out there. We're going to make it through. But funny enough, I didn't actually go and get tested per se, but with 3 of us being in the house and all of us having the exact same symptoms with a positive test of COVID, things are pretty, it's pretty safe to say that that's what it was. So myself, my dad, and my mom all ended up getting it, which I guess is kind of all right because we're all able to be in the same house, and we don't really have to quarantine from each other when that happens. So I guess it makes it a little bit easier. Obviously, none of us are just able to leave, the unfortunate part, and all feeling pretty crappy at the time. So, but we ended up making it through, thankfully. And, hopefully in the next few months, this thing can be totally over. But yeah, I thought that by somehow I was not gonna be able to, or I was not gonna get the virus somehow. But just over a year ended up happening. Unfortunate, but it's over. Thankfully, just shaking out the last little bit, and hopefully nothing like this again for at least for quite a while. Definitely one of it's up there for one of the worst sicknesses that I've had, at least as far as like the longevity. Most of the times when I get that cold or whatever that comes with the changing of the seasons and all that stuff, it's usually a day or 2 max. Typically don't even get a fever. Just feel pretty under the weather and need some rest and things like that. But this one, like I said, kept me in bed aside from basically having to piss for about 4 days. So pretty rough. Don't recommend. So for this podcast, for some of the stuff, I obviously had some stuff lined up from last week, so we're going to carry over a couple of topics. So if these couple of topics are a little bit old, I apologize. But these are a couple of things that I wanted to talk about from this last week. And of course, we got some stuff from this week, largely doing with the NCAA, as that's kind of the prime time right now with March Madness. Let's get into some of the stuff. We'll start off kind of small. Some stuff in the video game realm. Xbox made their official big signing or bringing on of the studio Bethesda. This has been something that's been in the works for a little while. Pretty much agreed upon, I think, for the last couple of months, but it was made official just a couple of weeks ago. So Bethesda is now being brought on as a partner studio to Xbox, which will probably bring in things things kind of like exclusivity, potentially with some games entirely, or getting certain DLC first, or things like that. Bethesda, creators of games like Fallout and Wolfenstein, and a lot of big games. So it's a pretty big studio for Xbox to bring on, and I think they actually officially bought them. If I'm correct, I don't think it was just a purely bringing on of the studio. I think they purchased Bethesda. But regardless, Bethesda is now officially an Xbox studio. That's a big thing. One of the big gripes Xbox gets a lot of times is that they don't have a lot of the big games, exclusive to their platform. a lot of people think they don't typically have a lot of the big games to offer on their platform as opposed to others. And a lot of the games that they do have to offer, other platforms usually do. But then bringing on Bethesda is going to be a big move. Typically not some of my personal favorite games or preferred games. I've played a few of them here and there, but not my preferred game, so not a huge thing for me. But for Xbox, it's big. Bringing on a studio like Bethesda that is a big fan favorite with a lot of different games. They've been very successful. So, and doesn't look like Xbox is done either, because we just got some word just the other night that they're in talks to acquire Discord. Discord is a massive communications company. They've gotten a massive blow up with everything here with the pandemic, because people have needed alternatives to, face-to-face meeting and stuff like that. Discord has largely been used in the gaming community for chatting online. Excuse me. My throat is going to struggle to make it through this, but we're going to do it. But Discord's been used a lot to be able to communicate online. Of course, they also offer a video chat feature as well. So not only Zoom, but other apps, including Discord, have gotten a big boost throughout the pandemic. And Xbox is looking to acquire them. This is something that gets used a lot, especially in the gaming side of things. And if Microsoft and Xbox were to acquire Discord, be nuts. It's looking to be a $10 billion acquisition, which, Microsoft has boatloads of money. The big thing that I would like out of this as an Xbox user would be the use of Discord through the Xbox. Currently, I don't think any of the console platforms offer Discord integration, at least in its purest form. The most use it gets out of is with a PC. That's usually what most people will use, is Discord. Very clear audio feature. It's very instantaneous. With a lot of the party chat features that Xbox and PlayStation have, they're delayed by just a slight little bit, by about half a second to a second or so. Which, if you're playing competitively, making quick callouts, that can be the time that ends up costing you. So definitely use Discord for that in the past, but they don't have any integration with any of the consoles, and party chat works pretty well for the console platforms. Definitely has a lot to be desired, and especially in comparison to Discord. So I would like to see Discord get integrated with Xbox if they do end up buying them out. I would like to see it get integrated. I would much rather use Discord's features and all those sort of things through Xbox rather than having to use the party system. I don't know. That's just me. And I think most people that have used Discord at any point in time would agree. The party system and all that stuff isn't bad. It's integrated with the consoles, so obviously it's made to work really well with all that. But if you've used Discord, it's better. But Xbox making some big moves. We love to see that here, at least in the Xbox fan side of things. Curious to see what else they're going to be doing. They've got lots of money. Microsoft is a massively bigger corporation than Sony is, who owns PlayStation. So they got a lot of money to work with and a lot of things to do. Xbox have been killing it so far with this new generation. They've been doing a lot of big things. Great console with the Series X. A couple big acquisitions. And looks like some upset from the side of Sony and PlayStation. Apparently they haven't quite delivered as much as people have hoped. And, of course, with the consoles still being insanely difficult to acquire, a lot of the stuff still has a ways to go and a lot of stuff to be written. But some big acquisitions, or one big acquisition and one upcoming with Xbox, which is pretty dope. We're going to get to one more thing from just a few weeks ago. We had this kind of tied in between both the sports world and the gaming world. We had Miami Heat center Meyers Leonard, or former Miami Heat center Meyers Leonard, who is playing Warzone. Talked about Warzone here on the pod. Pretty popular game out there right now. Call of Duty's Battle Royale. He was on playing Warzone, and while playing in a fight, used an anti-Semitic slur. I think I just used that word right. Anti-Semitic slur while playing. He used a word that obviously I'm not going to repeat. That is basically used to insult Jewish people. This, obviously, because it was public, it was done on live stream, led to a lot of bad stuff for Meyers Leonard. He got dropped by some of his partners in the gaming scene. He was then traded. I believe the trade officially went through with Miami. Maybe not. If not, he is still out indefinitely from the team. Because of this, I believe received a $50,000 fine from the league, if not maybe more. And things are not looking good for Meyers Leonard. This could be something that puts him out of a job, really. Not just in sports, but obviously in gaming and stuff as well. I know Astro Gaming dropped him as a partner there. I believe he had a connection with FaZe somewhere in there. That was torn apart. And there was a lot of takes on Meyers Leonard, whether he meant it, because to me, the word that he used, I had never even heard before. Had no clue what it meant, and apparently that seemed to be a pretty common thing from what I gathered on Twitter and other social medias. It seemed like it wasn't something that people knew a lot about as a word. And so there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of talk on his intent. Did he just kind of pull this word to throw the first thing that he could think of out, and he really had no clue what it meant? I think we've all been there at one point or another. Did he know what it meant? Did he have intent behind it? Not sure. This obviously made its way into mainstream media as well, and of course with Meyers Leonard being involved in sports, made its way onto networks like ESPN, namely First Take, which, as a debate show, in my opinion, has been known for a lot of its bad takes. Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman, typically, in my opinion, don't give the greatest takes. They give some pretty outlandish ones. Probably part of their job to make things interesting is that they don't always give the most thoughtful and best takes out there. And when I saw this video pop up in my YouTube feed, I was kind of hesitant to watch it because it's First Take, it's normal media. They're going to be calling for this dude's head, trying to cancel him, all this stuff. That's what the mainstream media does. But to my surprise, Stephen A. and Max both talked about this topic on First Take. To my surprise, one of the better takes that I've heard in First Take. And we'll let you guys listen to it and see for yourselves what you guys think. The first part in this that they're going to be talking about is the quote that came out from Julian Edelman, who is also Jewish. And they're going to talk about this in this clip that I play. But Julian Edelman basically came out and, in my opinion, gave a great statement saying that he didn't want to push him aside and essentially cancel him because of all this stuff, but he wanted to sit down and talk with him and hopefully inform him and take the situation and better him because of it, which I think was a great take. Molly's going to read this take off. Max is going to give his opinion on this stuff, and that's what you guys are going to be hearing here to set up. Bada boom. Let's go.
Quote, I get the sense that you didn't use that word out of hate, more out of ignorance. Most likely, you weren't trying to hurt anyone or even profile Jews in your comment. That's what makes it so destructive. When someone intends to be hateful, it's usually met with great resistance. Casual ignorance is harder to combat and has greater reach, especially when you command great influence. Hate is like a virus. Even accidentally, it can rapidly spread. I'm down in Miami fairly often. Let's do a Shabbat dinner with some friends. I'll show you a fun time. It has also since been announced that Leonard will be away from the Heat indefinitely, that according to the organization, while the NBA conducts an investigation. Max, what's your reaction to Meyers Leonard's comments there?
First, I want to react to Julian Edelman. I like when he does this very much. He did it with Deshaun Jackson, too. Instead of canceling someone, as they say, usually bigotry or that kind of speech, and bigotry generally, is from fear and hate, but also largely from ignorance. And so what Julian Edelman does is reach out a hand and say, look, let me put you up on some stuff, and maybe it'll change the way you think and behave. And I like that outreach from Edelman. I applaud it, both in the Deshaun Jackson case and here with Meyers Leonard. Let me say, I'm Jewish. But not only am I Jewish, I speak Yiddish. Ich red Yiddish. Ich kann auch noch schmooze auf Yiddish. I just spoke Yiddish on ESPN, right? I had relatives who were killed in the Holocaust. My youngest daughter, Mira, is named for my great-grandmother who was shot in the Bethesda ditch, along with 3,000 other Jews by the Nazis. This is a personal issue to me. I am not offended, personally. I think oftentimes when these things happen, you have to ask yourself, who is the offended party? Because I feel that we're in a great rush to be offended by something. And I am a member of the group of which he's speaking, and I'm not offended. However, I have questions. I'm not offended because I don't believe he meant it, other than just kind of like a kind of general kind of insult toward the person he was shooting at in the game, right? Or playing against in the game. But I do have questions. I have questions. This is different than Deshaun Jackson, who quoted Hitler and then highlighted an especially anti-Semitic part, right? And even then, I'm not ready to cancel Deshaun Jackson. I have questions. And I didn't like Deshaun Jackson's explanation. It led to more questions. And I have questions for Meyers Leonard. I don't believe he doesn't know what the word means. And I don't know literally what the word means either. I know it's an insult towards Jews. That's all you have to know. It's meant as an insult towards Jews. I also don't find an equivalency here with this and the N-word, let's say, because we're not in Germany. We're living in the United States. The history of different persecuted ethnic minorities is not exactly the same as African American history. So there's a lot that goes into this. I'll just say, I'd like to know, Stephen A., where he was coming from. What did he mean by it? I don't believe he doesn't know that he didn't know it was an insult toward Jews. Is he from a kind of friend group that messes around like that? Was he playing someone who was Jewish and they're going back and forth like that? I'd like to know. The very least we can say is right now, Meyers Leonard's paying a stupid tax, because it's one thing to do that privately and say, that's the culture of my friend group. It's quite another to do it publicly. That, at the very least, you pay a stupid tax for, and more than that, now I have questions I'd like to hear you answer.
All right. That was Max's take. Basically, Stephen A. just goes on to discuss that how much he appreciates Max's take. Talks about that basically Max said a lot of stuff that Stephen A. didn't even know. And Stephen A. basically just talks for the next couple minutes about how his opinion doesn't matter. The offended party's opinion really here is what matters, and all this stuff. But that was a phenomenal take. I love a mainstream media take to where we don't automatically jump to canceling the guy who made a mistake. Max basically said the same thing from Edelman's quote, which I also thought was great, to where it didn't want to jump to canceling or getting rid of the guy or wiping him from existence, but rather having questions and wanting to educate and getting more information about where Meyers Leonard was coming from in this situation. I think that's the important part here. And I think more people need to have this side of trying to educate rather than belittle. Because odds are, especially with a word like this, and from a lot of the info that I gathered, a lot of people don't really even know what this word means or where it comes from. Meyers Leonard may have came from the same party in that sense. We don't know. If Meyers Leonard knowingly knew what this word meant and his intent was to, insult Jews by using it on live stream, which is very unlikely, then, that makes this a whole different situation. But if he used it as a word to where he didn't really know what it meant, may not have even known that it was an insult towards Jews, he might have, but may have not, then this is just ignorance. It's just an insult used out of ignorance. And Meyers needs to be educated and learn from people like Julian Edelman, Max Kellerman, others, the offended party in this sense, the origins of this, and why it is so offensive and should not be used. This is the route we should be taking. This whole cancel culture stuff, it's been talked about here before on the pod. But it's not the right move. Having people make mistakes and then getting rid of them and wiping them from existence because of it is not the way to go. We are all human. We're all going to make mistakes. If we just get rid of somebody every time they make a mistake, not going to have very many people around. This is not the way to go. These sort of moves by people like Edelman and Max Kellerman is the way these things should be handled. Plain and simple. So hats off to Edelman, to Max, for these takes and for doing them in the public eye like this in a world where cancel culture is so prominent and seemingly popular. May not be the easy thing to do, especially as, two people like they are, the offended party, both being Jewish. May not be easy to look at something like this and, not really jump to being offended, because it's the popular thing to do. And in today's world, they would probably be applauded for doing so. But they took, in my opinion, the better route, the more educational route for Meyers. And hopefully Meyers is able to come back from this. This is a really bad mistake. Like Max said, one that's in the public eye and he's going to pay a stupid tax for because of it. When stuff is done like that in the public, when you have that many eyes on you, your mistakes are going to be amplified more than, some nobody who's sitting in their house by themselves, probably saying the exact same thing. You're going to suffer more consequences because of that. And Meyers deserves to suffer some consequences. But to be theoretically beheaded is not the right move. So, mad props to Julian Edelman, to Max Kellerman for their takes. Definitely ones that I would agree with and the side that I was taking on this, as I usually do. But it's just nice to see it in the mainstream media of things. Kind of gives you some hope in the world, at least a little bit. Let's get into some more current topics. Those ones, like I said, are a couple weeks old, but with missing last week and stuff like that, put us a little bit behind. But those were a couple things I still did want to get my opinion out there on. But let's get into some more current stuff. These last two things are going to be in accordance with the NCAA Tournament that, of course, is going on right now in the midst of March Madness. And some madness it has been. Let me find the current bracket. There we go. All updated. And my goodness, it has been a tournament for the ages. Not really surprisingly so when you put everything into perspective of the fact that this is a tournament like no other. It's been a season like no other. One played with very little to no fans in comparison to what there usually is at these events, still due to COVID. So things have been different for all these teams, all these players. Things have not been the same. So when you put it in that perspective, not crazy to think that maybe some more upsets or some bigger upsets could happen because of this. But it's been a wild tournament. It's been a wild March thus far. Things have ran a little bit differently. Some of the days have been different. And, we have just gotten some big upsets. Things have not gone how a lot of people thought. The big conference coming into this tournament was the Big Ten. And sure, maybe I'm a little biased in that, being a Michigan fan, and in accordance with that, a biased fan of the Big Ten. But I think a lot of people agree that they were the powerhouse coming in. They had filled the top 25 rankings, a lot of those spots basically throughout the entire season. A lot of big name teams were in there, teams like Michigan, Ohio State, Iowa, Illinois, all there. And they filled out each couple of them in the 1 seeds, couple of them in the 2 seeds. We had teams like Purdue in there as well. That was a 4 seed. There were some big name teams, and the Big Ten looked to be very, very strong coming into this tournament. And now, after the first 2 rounds, we have one Big Ten team left, and that is Michigan. not too much of a disappointment there, but would like to see a little bit more Big Ten representation. We had Ohio State, a 2 seed, fall to the big surprise of the tournament, Oral Roberts. They've won their first 2 games. They're in the Sweet 16 as a 15 seed. They took down Ohio State and then faced Florida and took them down as well. So they're going to be playing 3 seed Arkansas coming up in this next matchup on the 27th. See if Oral Roberts can make this magic go even farther. We had 11 seed Syracuse, who, from everything I know, kind of snuck into the tournament, was kind of one of those teams on the bubble of whether they would end up making it or not. They took down 6 seed San Diego State and then took down the 3 seed from that side, West Virginia as well. So they're an 11 seed in the Sweet 16. Oregon State, another one, taking down 5 seed Tennessee, kind of that 5-12 matchup, the one that gets talked about a lot in the tournament. It's usually the one, if you see an upset, it's a pretty likely one to see. Oregon State is that team this year. So they took down Tennessee and then beat 4 seed Oklahoma State. They are in the Sweet 16. We got UCLA, who I believe had to play, they had to play Michigan State as a play-in game to even get into their 11 seed slot. They then beat BYU. And then they take down a 14 seed, who is the game under them. We had a 3-14, where the 14 won. That was Alba. How do you say this school's name? Abilene Christian. I think I got that right. So they, as a 14, knocked down Texas by a point. So they beat a 3 seed to move on. UCLA, an 11 seed, beat 6 seed BYU to move on. So we had an 11 and a 14 in the round of 32. UCLA then beat them to move on, so we have an 11 seed in the Sweet 16. 10 seed Maryland took down 7 seed UConn. Not that crazy of one. Maryland's been a pretty good team all year, so as a 10 seed, wasn't crazy to see that one. Then Alabama won their 2 games. Not surprised to see them in the Sweet 16. If we go to Michigan side, nothing too crazy to look at there. Michigan and Florida State, who were from their little part there in their side of the bracket, were the 2 highest seeds. So nothing really crazy there. We go up 1. Iowa, 2 seed, getting knocked out by 7 seed Oregon, who made it there because, is this the game? I believe this was the game that was because of COVID that Oregon got a free game. I'm assuming this is the one because on the bracket it has no score. So I'm assuming this is the one. Oregon moved on because VCU had some COVID thing go on, so they got a free seed to move on. And then they took down Iowa by 15 in a game where Luka Garza, one of the best players in the nation, had 36 points. So they're in the Sweet 16. 6 seed USC ended up taking down 11 seed Drake. And then the 3rd seed Kansas by 34 points? Oh my goodness. Man, oh man. Getting one of our last upsets, we had 13 seed Ohio take down Virginia. They ended up facing against Creighton, the 5 seed. Creighton moved on. They're going to play Gonzaga, the 1 seed, who wiped through their first 2 games, no problem. And that is where we are at now in the NCAA tournament. We're in the Sweet 16. Games are going to be starting up here again on the 27th in just a few days. And we're hammering right through this tournament in a crazy one with some wild games. So we've got 2 1s, 2 2 seeds, a 3, a 4, couple 5, 6, 7, and 8. What else we got? 2 11s and a 15. I think I hit on everybody. Man, crazy one. Who would have thought Oral Roberts coming? I mean, a lot of people had Ohio State potentially moving on to the Elite 8, the Final 4, as a 2 seed. They're a team that kind of struggled a little bit toward the end of the year, but still a 2 seed against a 15. You're going to take that one more times than not, but shout out the Eagles of Oral Roberts. Sweet 16 bound. We'll see what they can do against Arkansas, but a wild tournament it's been. Everybody's bracket is busted. There were no perfect brackets left after, I don't even think we made it to the round of 32 before there were no perfect brackets left. I think it was last year or the year before we had a few that were perfect for a decent amount of time, like longer than usual. They usually all get busted pretty quick. Yeah, but this year did not last very long. And like I said, with all the stuff with COVID, and I mean, some teams probably aren't practicing the same amount and haven't got the same battle-tested reps maybe as previous seasons with little to no fans. So, man, a wild tournament for sure. It's not done yet. We'll see if the big powerhouse teams like Gonzaga, Baylor, and Michigan, if they can continue. Oh my goodness, I just realized I missed one of the upsets. Loyola, who took down 1 seed Illinois, as I named off the 1 seeds. I just remembered. Illinois, who was probably some people's favorites, the way they have ran through the entire year, and then, beating Michigan pretty handily toward the end of the year. A lot of people had picked them to potentially take the tournament. A lot of people aren't too high on Gonzaga. They're not battle-tested enough and stuff. I typically agree there. So Illinois was a lot of people's picks potentially to come through and make a lot of noise in this tournament. And they got ousted in the round of 32 by our good old friends Loyola Chicago, who made a deep run a few years ago as a... Oh man, what seed were they? 11 maybe? They had just snuck into the tournament, and not a very popular school, but a lot of people know their name now from a few years ago. I think it was the 2018 tournament. They're an 8 seed this time around. They end up upsetting Illinois, so they are in the Sweet 16. They are facing 12 seed Oregon State. So that was another one of our big upsets. Almost forgot about good old Loyola Chicago. But anyway, we're going to see if our 3-1 seeds can hang on, if they can still make some noise. Gonzaga's got Creighton, Michigan has Florida State, and Baylor has Villanova. So probably some pretty good matchups upcoming for both of those teams. Not going to be any easier from here on out. So we'll see if those 1 seeds can hang on. I know Gonzaga has rolled through the first couple of games, and I think they're still undefeated throughout this entire season. But man, they just don't play anybody. Never. Ever. They're always the school that doesn't play anybody, that gets a lot of noise. Gonzaga is always up there as one of the top seeds. It gets talked about a lot because they don't lose. We'll see. They got Creighton coming up. Also in their side of the bracket, they've got, I guess, just USC and Oregon. So thanks to some of the upsets, they may have gotten a lot of help. But we'll see. It's been upset central, so at this point, who knows? Michigan took down their 16 seed pretty handily. Probably a little closer than it should have been, but regardless, pretty easy 16-point win. And then LSU. Watching that game, man, LSU looked so good. It was a shock to me to see Michigan come away with that, even though it's a 1 versus 8 seed. But Michigan still without Isaiah Livers. I don't know if he is planning on coming back at any point for the rest of the tournament. Probably pretty unlikely. He's one of their better players, so might be a matter of time before they end up, just having a 1 bad game and, being out. It's tough without your better players at this time of the year when it's a 1-game thing. Anything can happen. But I'm not going to do any Final Four predictions. Kind of missed the boat there. We're already halfway through the tournament pretty much. So just an update on all things with the tournament. It's been a wild March, been a wild tournament. It's probably going to continue. We'll see if any of these other big upset teams can continue to make some noise. We'll see how many more of the 1 seeds fall here in the Sweet 16. March is only going to get crazier. It's a great time of the year. If you love basketball, especially if you love college basketball, no greater time. And it's especially a lot nicer because we missed out on it last year with the initial hit of COVID. So for it to be back this year is very, very dope. But one more thing we're going to get into here to round out the pod with the things in the NCAA. We had some controversy between the men's and women's basketball programs, or at least the setups here from the NCAA. And this got a lot of talk on social media. This started off as basically one main picture. Yeah, let's flip to that real quick. So for those watching on the YouTube version, this is the picture that I'm referring to. These are the two weight rooms for the men's and the women's NCAA tournaments, essentially, from where they're being held. For those of you who are on the listening platforms, basically the men's room is stocked with a ton of equipment. There's stuff everywhere. There's weights everywhere. There's racks everywhere. I mean, stuff is everywhere inside this massive room. And if you look on the bottom with the women's side, there's one stack of weights that goes up to probably, 30, 40 pounds? I can't see that mark there. And then there's a stack of sanitized yoga mats. That's it. And those are the differences between the two weight rooms for each of these, for the men's and the women's. This wasn't the only thing, though. We also had some difference in the swag bags, which are the little gift goodies that all the players get on each team for making it to the NCAA tournament. This first one here is the men's. And to describe it for those of you on the listening platforms, there's a massive blanket. There's all sorts of soap and all those different things. Hats, sweatshirts, t-shirts, some books. That might be a free pair of shoes in that box right there for all I know. There's a ton of stuff here. Lots of different goodies and whatnot. And then if we flip to the second picture, this is the women's. One hat, one t-shirt, couple of water bottles, some socks, a puzzle, a little banner right there, and probably about half the soap or so that the men's team ended up with. So those are the differences in a couple of the areas there between some of the stuff that the men got and some of the stuff that the women got. And rightfully so, there's a lot of outrage on this. I don't really disagree with the outrage or the thought that some of the stuff that the women got is pretty weak, to say the least. It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, hardly any of the stuff that they got. I mean, you could get this stuff really out of the gift shop if you went to the NCAA tournament. I mean, you could buy some of the stuff that the women got in the swag bag for probably, if we figure for the upcharge of being at the tournament, less than $100. Maybe even less than that. I'm probably highballing it. Maybe under $70. Not really a lot of stuff there. And if we look over at the men's, I mean, holy crap. I mean, we're talking excess of a few $100s here. So rightfully so, there's a lot of outrage and all the same stuff with the weight rooms and stuff like that. I mean, I've been to, less than stellar hotels and stayed in, resorts and stuff on vacation that have had nicer weight rooms and stuff than what the women got. And mind you, these hotels and stuff, they're not there to have nice weight rooms and stuff. They're there to say that they have a weight room in their nice little pamphlet when you get there. So pretty lackluster on both of those sides. And like I said, rightfully so, there's some outrage and some disgust with this because it is pretty whack. To see the lack of effort put into the stuff with the women's side of things. But what gets ridiculous is when the outrage turns into outrage of inequality rather than outrage of not getting a good, well-rounded product. I don't think it's any secret to think that the women's and men's basketball programs in the NCAA are not even comparable. The only similarity is they play the same sport. Aside from that, it is two totally different things. They're not comparable at all. One draws in this massive thing that has this massive branding of March Madness, gets this massive viewership all the time. A lot of times can get more viewership than the professional games. It draws that big of a crowd. Same thing if you look in the football side of things. The men's college football and basketball programs bring in a lot of viewership, a lot of revenue, a lot of attention. When you look at the women's side of things, it's not there. And it's not because every single person on this planet is a sexist. There's plenty of women out there too. And these same programs, these same events just don't garner the same viewership and attention. It's how it is. And it's not to say that all women's sports aren't interesting. I know that's an argument a lot of people like to jump to. I totally disagree. I think women's volleyball does tremendous. The women's World Cup, every time it comes around, that gets a massive viewership. Nobody here really in the United States, at least around where I live, talks about soccer a lot, especially women's soccer a lot. But when the women are in the World Cup every 4 years, right? I mean, you would think it's the biggest thing around. We start talking about it like we're some of the European countries. People love it. People are addicted to it. And also every year when women's softball comes around, that's another big one. Women's softball is awesome to watch. Like, I don't really find myself watching a lot of women's sports, but women's softball is honestly a lot of fun to watch. It's a really exciting event. But we start looking at things like basketball, they just don't bring a lot of the same attention that the men's do. I would honestly argue that women's softball gets a lot more attention than the men's baseball does in the college side of things. Could be wrong there, but when it comes around to the season every single year, I see a lot more women's softball than I do baseball, or at least I feel like I do. So, bottom line, I hate when this argument gets spread to an inequality, as if the reason that this is not equal, like the swag bags not being the same as the women's, and the weight rooms not being the same, is purely entirely the fact that every single person on the board at the NCAA just says, yeah, we don't like women, so don't give them anything worthwhile. That seems to be how it gets laid out. Now, mind you, what the women got in both of these areas is extremely lazy, and at the very least should be getting a decent amount more. But why are we making the argument that, well, the swag bags aren't equal to the men's, or the weight rooms aren't the same as the men's? There's not as much effort being put into the women's side of things as much as the men's side of things. And no shit. Why would they? That'd be a waste of energy, be a waste of assets on something that, no matter how much effort they put into it, is not going to garner the same amount of attention. If you flip these roles, if you gave the men's the shitty swag bags and the weight room and stuff, I mean, yeah, it would garner a lot of attention, but it's not going to automatically garner more attention and viewership towards the women's tournaments. Do they even televise the women's tournaments? I'm being serious. I wouldn't know where to find it. ESPNW maybe would be how you'd find it. I genuinely don't know. I have no idea. It just doesn't get any attention or have the same interest. So no matter what, the things shouldn't be equal. Not because of the fact of it's men versus women, but just because of the fact of it's a business. These things bring in revenue. These things get attention. They're not going to get the same focus. And they shouldn't. Just like on the flip side, if the women's stuff was to get more attention, then they should be getting more of the effort and all that stuff. And that's not to say that the lackluster gift swag bags in the weight rooms and stuff is acceptable. It's not. They should be getting more than... How many dumbbells were on this thing? What is there, 12? And there's, I believe, 64 women's teams that show up to this. And y'all got 12 dumbbells to share? And, I mean, call it 10 yoga mats? I mean, that's ridiculous. I like that. Like, there's like less attention to detail and less effort, and then there's that. That's just not okay. They should be getting more. But the argument shouldn't be about the equality of stuff. It's like paying two different artists who do a show the same amount of attention and detail and all this stuff. And they do two totally different numbers. They shouldn't be getting the same type of attention and equality, because when it comes to broadcasts and games and all this stuff, they don't. You have a right to complain about this. You don't have a right to think that it's ridiculous that the men get more attention to detail and all this stuff than the women do. Because with the attention that they get in the games, in the viewership, the attention on social media, all that stuff, that's just how it's going to be. I mean, what are they going to do next? Come out on social media and call every single person that attends games sexist because the men get more people that show up to the games than the women do at theirs when they play in the exact same arena? Hello? Like, there's something you get a lot of equality with. A lot of the schools have the men and women play in the same arena. Like, they will share the same court, the same arena that the men and women play in. And in a lot of these schools, you get a boatload more fans that attend the men's games than attend the women's games. It's not at every school. I've been to plenty of schools where that's the opposite, because the women's team is really good, the men's team isn't as good, and they draw more fans at the women's games than they do at the men's. So, I mean, there's there's a point there where you have the exact same stuff. You're given the exact same opportunity, and you're seeing the difference. You know what I'm saying? It's this can't be the argument every single time that stuff isn't the same. You can be upset about the lackluster effort and quality of product without having to make an equality argument out of it. It's just how it is. I don't know what these people expect. People make the wrong arguments every time that there's something wrong with something like this. I don't get it. And I keep seeing it get preached on social media. You're making an argument you're not going to win. You're not going to get equal stuff to what a vastly bigger program has. Just how it is. It would be like giving a very small school that just got their basketball program the last year the same type of stuff that Duke has. That's what you'd be doing. Do you think Oral Roberts, who beat Ohio State, do you think they have the same level of stuff at each of their programs for their basketball teams? They don't. Not even close. I promise. It's not the same stuff. They both probably have very good stuff. But I promise you that Ohio State has a much better facility than that of Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts just comes out and plays. They know they don't deserve it. They're not as big of a school. They haven't done as much. If Oral Roberts was to become a powerhouse in basketball for the next 10 years, they would start to see that same stuff. But they're not a powerhouse. Granted, they've done great so far this year, make it to the Sweet 16. That's just how things are. When you don't garner the same type of attention, the same type of results, you're not going to get the same treatment. At the same time, that doesn't mean you shouldn't get better treatment, because these women do deserve better than what they got. 100%. But don't make the argument about equality, because you're not even equal programs. That is all. And that is going to be where we start to wrap things up for the podcast. Good to be back after last week off. Some good topics and some good stuff to talk about. We're all caught up now. All things are good in the hood. Hopefully no more COVID or anything like that. But if for those of you watching over on YouTube, leave your comments down below on all stuff that we talk about here on the pod. Make sure to smack the Schmidt like button down below. Subscribe to the podcast. New episodes every Thursday for those of you on the listening platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, and Stitcher. Follow on those platforms as well. If you're on Apple, leave those 5-star reviews. We'd love to read them out on the pod. And that is going to about do it for things here with the podcast. Really appreciate you guys tuning in once again. We'll be back next week with another episode of Shootin' the Schmidt. Hope you guys all have a good one. See you next week. So long, everybody.